And there she is. Hey, Emily.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm
Ready
so
to do this?
excited.
I know. So we're jumping back into this again, and obviously the bracket came out last night. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's dive right into it. Your initial takeaways from the bracket. We've been awaiting it for a long time after a crazy season.
An insane season. I mean, they mentioned it off the top of the selection show, but we've seen crazy upsets. We've also seen some dominance from other teams. I will say I'm just glad that I don't have the job of anybody on the selection committee because I don't know how they made any of these decisions. And even talking to Pauline Theros last night, I mean, some questions going in of course, those last four in, last few out. But I mean, I thought it was set up pretty well. The only real question I had was still, the last four in, you always kind of wonder, especially with a team like Ball State. I mean, getting in over a Texas State or maybe a Colorado State. But, I mean, Ball State deserves it. It was an exciting one. But overall, I think it's set up pretty well, and we have some good matchups that we're definitely looking forward to.
You happy about the parity this season? I feel like with the new seeding, it is more spread out. Obviously, there's some loaded quadrants. I think that just has to do with how good everybody is this season. But are you overall happy with the parity?
I think the parity is good. I mean, it's nice that they did the seeding the way they did, where you had, all through 32 teams. And I know they seeded out 1 through 32, obviously didn't exactly share that, but it was really smart to have the 1 through 8 seeding. I thought just geographically, we aren't seeing, the exact same matchups that we see year after year, which I think is exciting, sending these teams to new places. I mean, the host seeds, we have them all over the country, so that's pretty exciting too. But I mean, yeah, parity all around. We could see some crazy upsets in that first or second round that I don't know if we've necessarily seen before. I mean, especially those teams that maybe snuck in at the end, I think could definitely upset a few people.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to jump right into predictions because that's the most fun part. We obviously both just filled out our brackets, so those who are watching this are going to get a sneak peek probably before we post our full bracket. So I want to talk our final four picks, championship game, and maybe even go into the title winner. So I'll let you go first. I know we talked about this in our last live and we obviously had different picks, but what do you got, Emily?
I'm so boring for my Final Four. I mean, I have all chalk. I have all the 1 seeds. But when I was filling it out, it was like I just think that these genuinely are the 4 teams that are playing their best volleyball right now. I mean, I have Texas, Wisconsin, Stanford, and Louisville. I know it's wildly boring, but just going through the bracket, I didn't see these teams. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to upset those 1 seeds. Again, I think they're bringing so much momentum into the tournament. I mean, you talk about a team, especially like Wisconsin, they're on an 18-game win streak right now. I mean, you don't do that normally in the Big Ten. Texas was the easy one for me. I mean, I think they're going to make it all the way to the championship match. Stanford, I think, too, is playing their best volleyball. And with the quadrant that they had, I didn't see any teams that might be able to upset them in the way that I think maybe these other quadrants had. I think the most questionable one for me was Louisville making to the Final Four. I mean, they could run into a team like Nebraska or even Oregon if you see an early upset. And I don't know if there's a team that maybe could beat Louisville there. The one that might be able to do it, I think, would potentially be Nebraska. But I got all chalk. I'm so boring in my Final Four. Who'd you have?
I mean, I wanted to go chalk too. In my gut, I did feel like those were the best 4 teams. But there's always an upset, and it's so hard to pick it. But I don't know. So I'm going Texas. I do think Texas has the hardest quadrant. But I just can't pick anybody over the Longhorns. I just think they're the best team in the nation. They feel like Wisconsin last year to me. I'm going Stanford as well. I think they have the easiest path. I agree with you there. I'm going Wisconsin, and then on that bottom right quadrant, I picked Nebraska.
Okay.
And I didn't necessarily want to because I did watch Louisville in person. I think they're just a special team. I think they can win the title. I mean, I want to make another bracket and have them win it, for crying out loud. But Nebraska, I mean, they have a chance to play close to home in Omaha. They always play well in the tournament. They've got John Cook as their coach. I just think it's possible they do it. And if I wanted to pick a non-chalk Final Four, that was the quadrant I think I wanted to go for there.
Yeah, and I think Nebraska is an interesting one too because, as you mentioned, I mean, you have coaches ever with John Cook coaching this team, and that's also a team that gets better as the season goes on. I think aside from last weekend where they had some injuries that were playing into those matches for sure, and the way that that team tried to adjust to that, it was a little bit questionable. But I think that's definitely a team that could make it back to the Final Four. I mean, they made it last year as a 10 seed, and that's not something you see that often.
Yeah.
But again, John Cook knows how to get its team going during the postseason, especially. And with that team specifically, I mean, they have the experience of also being there. You look at a team potentially, a team like Louisville who has also been there. But I don't know. I mean, Nebraska definitely could be a sleeper team that I wouldn't be surprised to see them at all in the Final Four.
Yeah, it's one of those that I wouldn't be surprised if they lost in the third round, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see them in Omaha. So it's tough to pick for sure. Let's go into Player of the Year picks and Freshman of the Year. Obviously, Player of the Year, we've got to talk about Logan Eggleston, but I also think you got to talk about Kendall Kipp, Julia Bergman, names like Taylor Landfair. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I'm looking at this, it's those top three for me. Logan Eggleston from Texas, Kendall Kipp of Stanford, and Julia Bergman is obviously, she has to be in that conversation from Georgia Tech just with the numbers that she's putting up. To me, it's a conversation between Logan Eggleston and Kendall Kipp. I think the conversation around Eggleston this entire year has been, it's kind of been hers to lose. And I don't think she's done anything to absolutely lose that. I mean, she has put up some crazy numbers this season, 4.3 kills per set. She's 13th in the country in points per set. I think the way that she plays in the tournament might define who gets that award. But then for me, I don't know. I might go with Kendall Kipp. I think the things that she has done for the Stanford team to really lead them. I mean, this is a team that really relies on her to get a lot done. And as an opposite, that's not something that's so easily done. I mean, most opposites around the country usually only play about 3 rotations and then they get subbed out. They're focused on hitting the entire time. But what Kendall Kipp does so well, it's her all-around play. She's a really experienced opposite. It's so important in the back row. It's so important to their team's passing and, serving as well. I mean, she has one of the nastiest serves in the country. I know that's a big reason why right now, I mean, she's third in the Power 5 in points per set. She just racks up points left and right. And I think it'll be a decision of how well do these two players play in the tournament to potentially get to that Final Four and how well they do up to that point.
Absolutely. And when you look at Freshman of the Year, I kind of think the same thing. There's 2 names that come to mind with Eva Hudson and Mimi Collier at Oregon. Yeah. I don't know if you have any others to throw in the mix, but they're back-to-back on the full stat line of kills per set in the country. I think Hudson has 4.21 and Collier has 4.2. So basically even there. To me, you got to go with who's making the biggest impact for their team. And Purdue's just fallen off lately. And Eva Hudson hasn't been as big of an impact as she was earlier in the season. So I've got to go with Collier there.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think I would give my pick to Mimi Collier as well. And what's impressed me most about her, where you mentioned Eva Hudson, she's been the one that's been carrying that team. I mean, when they need a bailout, they're going to give her the ball. I think Hudson, I don't want to say she's the sole reason Purdue has had so much success because I think their backcourt has had a lot to do with it as well. But she's getting so many of their attempts. I mean, that team completely relies on her. They've been switching out their outsides and right side throughout this entire season, but she's really been the number one consistent in carrying that team. And then you look at a player like Mimi Collier, who's putting up pretty much the exact same numbers, but she also has Brooke Nunneveller to take a lot of those attempts away. So you look at a freshman that's not only putting up those numbers, but putting up those numbers with a lot less attempts during sets. And that's what has made her most impressive to me is not only is she putting up those numbers, but she's also splitting the load with someone who's as good, someone who's putting up pretty similar numbers to Mimi Collier as well. And I think Oregon is playing its best volleyball right now. That's what you want to see out of your freshmen. You want them to get better as the season has gone on. Not to say Eva Hudson hasn't, because she's done a phenomenal job this entire season, especially right out of the gates. But I'm picking Mimi Collier just because she's splitting the load and still putting up great numbers. And Oregon is a team that I think could upset a lot of people in this tournament.
Absolutely. We're getting a lot of comments about Alexis Stuckey too at Florida.
Yeah.
What do you think you would take for a setter?
Yeah, so my other 2 picks for Freshman of the Year, I had Alexis Stuckey from Florida. I mean, she's a freaking phenom. She does such a good job leading that team. I mean, she's second in the SEC in assists per sets, but that's right behind Emma Grome, who, SEC Player of the Year. That's an easy pick. But to follow right behind her in her footsteps, I mean, she's doing such a great job with this Florida team, and I think they have a lot of balance in their offense as well. And the other person that I'm maybe thinking of is Gulje Gutchikin from Wisconsin, their libero. It is so tough for a libero to come into a team and do as well as she's done. And I mean, she's a libero for a number 1 seed team in this tournament. And I think that has to be recognized as really leading that backcourt and allowing their offense to be as great as it is.
All right, so let's move on now from the talk of player of the year to the actual bracket, the tournament, some of the games. So looking at some of the first and second round games, do you have any that really stand out to you that we can't miss in the first and second round?
Yeah, I definitely have a few. I think, honestly, all of those 8-seeded games where you have an 8 seed versus a team that's non-seeded, I mean, all of those could go either way. The ones that I'm really looking at, Towson versus Georgia. Georgia's a really good team, and I know they were kind of on the bubble whether or not they were going to get in, but they swept Florida earlier this season, and I think they could potentially snag that spot from Towson. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
I have actually Georgia beating Towson in my bracket.
Yeah,
I've caught a few of their games. It is my alma mater. That's not why I picked them, but I just, I've been watching them, and I think they have the potential. They've been a little inconsistent, but I think they have the potential to do it. Towson was really close to in terms of hosting and whatnot and being a seed. So I think Towson fell off since that win against Pitt. So I went with Georgia. I wanted to pick an upset early.
Yeah, I had a few others too. I mean, Hawaii, LSU, that could be a great one. LSU's done a great job this season. They had a win over Kentucky, one of those big wins that really shot them up and I think solidified their tournament chances. But that's another one I'm looking at. And you have Washington, TCU. I mean, TCU has done such a great job this year. Washington has been so up and down, I think, coming in with a lot of expectations of that team that were, we were trying to figure out who this team might be. But TCU could upset them. And then another one I'm really looking at, Miami and Kansas. I think that could be another potential upset with a 7 seed. I mean, Kansas pushed Texas to 5 earlier this season, has done such a great job in their conference as well. And that's one that I've definitely circled as I could definitely see Kansas get an upset there.
Yeah, so looking at my bracket, I did pick LSU over Hawaii. That was just kind of like a gut pick there. As far as Kansas, think back to last year. They were the team that went on the run. Obviously, they had Caroline Crawford, but they took down Oregon in the first round and then Creighton.
Yeah.
So this team has some tournament experience. They could do it again. I do have them beating Miami in the first round. In the second round, I'm looking at the potential of Georgia Tech Marquette, Creighton Houston. I like that one a lot. And Ohio State USC. I mean, I feel bad that Southern California is in that quadrant just because I think they're really good. Skylar Fields has been so impressive for that team. Obviously, she doesn't have a ton of supporting characters as much as other teams, but I think that could be a good matchup. And then you've got UCF Penn State too.
Yeah, I was looking at that USC Ohio State one as well, and that'll be so interesting. And I know USC is pretty banged up, and Skylar Fields has been in and out of the lineup, but just watching her play her game has been such an honor this year. I mean, she's done such an incredible job, a great move for her to USC from Texas, but that could definitely be one that could shake things up, especially with the Buckeyes being as up and down as they have been. I mean, losing the last 4 headed into this tournament, they don't have a lot of momentum coming in, but you also wonder maybe that could light a fire under them and really say, hey guys, okay, we got to get our stuff together to make a deep run in this tournament, because that's what we've been talking about since day one.
Absolutely. All right, so let's take a look at some more dark horse teams to watch out for. Maybe some teams that aren't seeded, aren't hosting. For me, what stands out, I mean, Houston and UCF both didn't get a top 16 seed, so they're standing out to me because I had them in my bracket prediction as possibly hosting.
Yeah, no, I agree. UCF led by McKenna Melville. I mean, they are incredible. And it's a team that also I think a lot of people don't hear about. They're not on TV that often, so you might not see them in action. And same thing with Houston. I mean, they are on an absolute roll. They're doing so well, did so great during their conference play. They could definitely be dark horses. When I'm thinking of dark horses too, I know it's not that exciting, and I already kind of mentioned it, but I really think that Ohio State could potentially get through farther. I mean, they have to face Texas, which I'm giving Texas the upper hand there. But the other team that I'm looking at, Oregon, I mean, they could do some damage. I know they potentially face Arkansas in that second round and then could potentially face Nebraska, likely would face Nebraska. But I mean, I could see the Ducks pulling one out over the Huskers just with the way that Oregon is playing and versus the way that Nebraska is playing right now.
That's the thing that I struggled with the most with filling out my bracket is, do I go off of how they're playing right now or kind of what we've seen all season? I mean, Ohio State, if we're talking their mid-season form, I thought they could win the national championship. I know you did as well. Same thing with Minnesota. I mean, midway through the season, they weren't playing as great as they are now. Wisconsin on an 18-game winning streak. Oregon, that we've seen them beat Stanford and pretty easily. What do we expect now? What did you base yours off of?
Well, I picked Nebraska to win against Oregon, but I agree. That was the number one matchup in this bracket that I had the most trouble with. And I ultimately gave it to Nebraska just from experience, been there, done that kind of thing, and having those players that have really made it far. But I mean, when you have Mimi Collier and Brooke Nunneveller on one team, they're tough to stop. And when I look at matchups a lot, so I'm thinking, okay, how is Nebraska's right sides? How are they going to block against Oregon's outside hitters? And to me, I would pick Oregon's outside hitters in that sense. I mean, Whitney Lonstein and Lindsay Krause have done a phenomenal job, especially Krause as of late. She's really lit it up. But, I mean, you have Nunneveller and Collier going against decently average blockers, Lonstein a little bit above average. But I don't know. I mean, it could be a really fun matchup and just some scrappy volleyball that's always exciting during the tournament.
Absolutely. All right, Emily, I want to talk through kind of all four quadrants. We talked about Texas's a little bit, how it's really tough, Ohio State, Georgia Tech, Minnesota. So really standing out to me, obviously, is Ohio State versus Minnesota here. Yeah. OSU wouldn't have even been in this quadrant had they not gone on that 4-game losing streak to end the season. And even if they had lost the last two, I still don't think they would have been here had they not lost those two unexpected matchups to Maryland and Indiana. So now all of a sudden we have a great team in the number one overall seeds quadrant.
And it's definitely a tough quadrant. I mean, you have a team like Georgia Tech in there that could potentially do some damage. I think the one matchup that I'm looking at, we already talked about Ohio State, USC, but Georgia Tech and Marquette could be really good. Two teams that, don't see each other. But you have Julia Bergman going against a really good Marquette team that's bringing a decent amount of momentum into this one. They ended up losing their conference tournament, but before that, I mean, they were on an absolute roll. That could be a matchup and that quad I'm really looking forward to. But you mentioned Ohio State, Minnesota. I mean, I think back to last weekend when Minnesota took that game against Ohio State. Ohio State was pretty banged up during that one. Kylie Murr came out with a pretty big knee brace in that game, and I know she was out the game beforehand. But that's going to be so exciting. One, for, Big Ten fans, it's always exciting to see two Big Ten teams go at it in the tournament. Of course, one trying to come out on top. But the number one thing Ohio State has been talking about once last season ended was we want to make an Elite Eight. And that is the one thing that they have been trying to do all season long. They brought nearly every single person back on that team, and they have a really experienced veteran group that they've been talking about it since day one. And it's fun that to get there, they get a rematch against Minnesota, the team that would have beaten them a few weeks prior, and to kind of have that recency too of, okay, what did we do during that game and what adjustments can we make? I think that'll be exciting because we'll see two teams that will have made those adjustments really go at it.
Absolutely. With Ohio State, that storyline is just so prevalent for me. I remember interviewing a few of them at Big Ten Media Days, and they were just like, we're sick of the Elite Eight. We want to make it farther.
Yeah.
I just hate that this is where they ended up. But it'll be a great matchup. I think that they can still do it. I don't know what it'll take to get out of this, how they've been playing lately, but I'm excited to see them go at it. And that's why I picked them. I just think that they have a lot of heart, and obviously this is their main storyline for this season. So I wanted to pick them to get past that round. Georgia Tech, I watched them in person. Erin Moss is just an X factor. Julia Bergman's consistent. If they can get Erin Moss going, I'm picking them. Obviously, I don't think they'll get through Texas, but I'm picking them over Marquette. Moving down to the bottom left bracket. So we've got San Diego and Stanford. I believe you got an upset pick in there with San Diego. What do you think?
I do. Look, I have been pulling for the Toreros. I thought they deserved a 1 seed. I don't think they necessarily match up with those 1 seeds really well, but I think you could have given them a 1 seed based on how well they've done this entire season and the resume that they brought to the table. But when I was filling this out, I ended up having them against Kentucky. And the reason that I had Kentucky win was because I think Kentucky is doing a great job right now just bringing momentum in, and they have a few key players that I think are just absolute playmakers. I mean, you have a setter like Emma Grome coming in that she's a playmaker. She makes stuff happen for that offense. And when you have someone like Azani Taylor going at it too, I felt a little bit more confident in this Kentucky team, especially coming off of 2020/2021, winning that championship. I mean, they have players on there that played on that national championship team. They've been there. They've done that. This is a San Diego team that lost in the first round last season. So when I filled my bracket out, I had them losing to Kentucky just from an experience factor. And again, looking at matchups, I just felt a little more strongly putting Kentucky in that. But I mean, when you get a 2 seed, you know that it's going to be a harder road because you'll probably end up facing a 3 seed, which is really comparable to your play. But I mean, this is such an exciting quadrant too. I mean, we have so many West Coast teams that are going to go at it. Even in the first round, I mean, Pepperdine against Stanford. Pepperdine, didn't end the season particularly well, but they started off so strong and were really hot to begin the season. Could be a first round matchup, but we'll see. And then Creighton Houston, that is going to be one that I've had my eye on. I was kind of hoping these two teams were eventually going to meet. Two teams that, again, you don't hear a ton about because you don't get to watch them on TV a lot, but these are teams that are just incredible. I mean, they're led really well. Their coaches are two of, my favorite coaches in the country right now. And I think they're coaches that have a lot of experience and can bring that to their teams.
It's funny. I just see Mimi Collier and Kendall Kipp just joined. We were just talking about you two with year and freshman of the year, so you're a little late to that. But for me, I'm just thinking San Diego, Stanford. I think it was designed so perfectly that San Diego has that amazing chance to say, hey, committee, you did me wrong, and I can do it. I do have Stanford advancing to the Final Four. I think that they can win the title. I Kendall Kipp on the opposite side, and I think that Cammie Minor is an elite setter, one of the best in the nation, and that's what I think will do it. Let's move on to the top right, the reigning champs. They have the potential to take on Penn State for the third time. Then you've got the Florida Pitt possibility.
Yeah, and that'll be a really exciting one. I think when I look at this top quadrant, this was the only quadrant that I didn't have any big upsets in. To me, it kind of fleshed its way out a pretty standard, when we talk about all chalk. I mean, this quadrant to me was kind of all chalk. I think Wisconsin will probably end up in the national championship match. I think that matchup potentially against Pitt could be really exciting, especially to see two 6-2 teams go at it. I mean, we've been talking all year about how the 6-2 actually works, and potentially to see two of those 6-2 teams in the Elite Eight could be so exciting. And I would love to see those teams go at it because, I mean, Pitt played so many good opponents during that non-conference. We didn't see the matchup against Wisconsin, but that's a matchup I've been looking forward to all season long.
Absolutely. I did pick Florida to upset Pitt. I wanted to kind of mix it up a little bit, and I think the Gators, they can do it. We were talking about some of their key players there. We've seen them beat Wisconsin. Obviously, the Badgers looked like a different team then. But Florida has had some really bright spots this season. Swept Kentucky, then was swept by Kentucky. They've been a little inconsistent. So I did go for it there. I remember last year Florida kind of gave Wisconsin the fight of their life in the tournament, a 5-setter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think back, what is that? That was in Omaha. It was one of the greatest matches I think I'd ever seen. And then I was lucky enough to be at that Kohl Center match when Florida played Wisconsin. And oh my gosh, Florida is an incredible team. I mean, their middles, Bree Kelly and Gabby Essex, are two of, I think, one of the best middle pairing duos in the entire country. They are so athletic. They do such a great job of reading the game. They see what's open. I mean, their blocking numbers are incredible. Offensively, they're great. I think where they match up against Pitt, it'll be really exciting to watch those middles go at it. And I ended up picking Pitt to advance to the Elite Eight, but I could definitely see Florida coming in and swooping in and getting a win there. But no, otherwise, I had a hard time picking any lower seed to win. One that I was questionable about, I mean, UCF and Penn State could be a good matchup. I think Penn State has gotten a lot better as this season has gone on. I mean, they started the season 12-0, beating Stanford and Oregon, doing a really good job there. But I don't know. I think I'm just giving the nod to Penn State because it's Penn State. They've been there. I think they're playing just a little bit better volleyball than UCF.
Yeah, I mean, Kashana Williams is just kind of lights out. They pushed Wisconsin to 5-2. I've been really impressed by them lately. In the bottom right, obviously, we talked about this with our Final Four picks. I have Nebraska taking down Louisville, even though I can see Louisville winning a national title. But what do you kind of see in this quadrant?
Yeah, we talked earlier, but I had Kansas beating Miami. I think, again, Kansas is one of those sleeper teams that you don't hear about a ton unless they're pushing Texas to 5 sets. But I think that's a team that could take down a team like Miami. I mean, they have a lot of fire under their butts, and they're really trying to make a tournament run. You mentioned that run that they had last season. I mean, they kind of want to get back to where they were. And a first-round upset, I think, could be exciting for them. Other than that, I ended up having Colorado over Rice, which we didn't mention earlier, but I think Colorado is such a good team. I mean, they had a win over USC, Washington State. They pushed Oregon to 5. I think that's a team that you could see upset a few people. And again, they didn't get seeded, but Colorado was a sneaky team that ended up, on the bubble, but got in, and I think they could do some damage. I don't think they would beat a team like Baylor in that next round, but I definitely think they could get out of the first round against Rice and make things interesting.
Yeah, I see that happening. All right. So we went through each quadrant. We did our final 4 teams. Who do you have in the championship game and winning it all?
All right, I have Wisconsin, Texas, which I would just die to see. I mean, these are 2 of the best offensive teams that we've seen all season. Wisconsin has gotten so much better since the beginning of the year. I think fleshing out that 6-2 system was really hard for them, getting those setter-hitter connections down and really finding some consistency there. But obviously, they're on an 18-match win streak in the Big Ten. That doesn't just happen without consistency. So with all this team has gone through this season with injuries and, off-the-court stuff, I love the way that they're playing and the way that they respond to any adversity thrown at them, especially having Caroline Crawford back in the lineup is so big for them. And we saw that play out in the match against Nebraska. I mean, her blocking number she's putting up, it makes a huge difference on that team. So I have them, and then I have them against Texas. And to me, that felt like, I don't want to say the easy pick, but it's the pick that makes the most sense. I thought I'd have Texas and Ohio State, getting Texas the nod on that one just because of how well-rounded they are and how consistent they are on a day-to-day basis. So I have Texas, Wisconsin, and I'm picking Texas. You mentioned at the beginning, but this Texas team reminds me so much of the Wisconsin team we saw last year. Like the storyline of all these players returning, you talk about Logan Eggleston, one of the best volleyball players of our generation. I think that this team wants to win for her, and this team just wants to win so bad. And I would love a storybook ending like that, similar to how we had last season with all these players returning and, the new people that they brought in to really make this elite squad that they have. I'm going to give them the nod just because I think that to get there, I mean, they want it so bad. Not saying Wisconsin doesn't want it, but I think matchup for matchup, I'm probably giving Texas the nod to hold up the trophy at the end.
This is my same championship matchup. No notes. I've got the same matchup. I mean, you said it. I think that Texas has everything. And This is their year. I remember last year at the beginning of the season, I wrote in my preseason predictions, like, is this the year of Dana Retke? Is this the year she wins ABCA Player of the Year and the national title? And I feel the same way about Eggleston. I mean, if she wins ABCA Player of the Year, it'll be because she brought her team and finally won that championship. She's won everything else. And you also got to think about the added defensive pieces that they have this year that they didn't have last year. I mean, they were knocked out by Nebraska last year, but they didn't have the same kind of defense. They didn't have Zoe Fleck back there. I mean, I just think that this is as deep as a team can get. And if they don't do it this year, I don't know when they will, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned how important Texas's defense is. And not only that, but really the serve receive. And I think the biggest downfall for Texas for the last few seasons has just been not having someone back there that can really lock it down. I mean, we've seen their serve receive fall apart in the tournament before over the past few years, but Zoe Fleck does not let things fall apart, and she does not let balls hit the ground. So I think that addition is one of the reasons why this Texas team is having so much success. They've always had the firepower. I mean, from the minute Logan Eggleston stepped on the court in Gregory Gym, she made a huge impact offensively and has only gotten better. But it's their defense that I think has taken massive strides in the last season. And I think Logan Eggleston, along with Zoe Fleck, I think could bring them a national championship.
Absolutely. I'm glad we agree on that. All right, Emily, we're going to end on a game just like we did last time. Last time we did a snake draft and kind of made our all-star teams, which was a lot of fun. I was trying to think of what we could do this time. Obviously, it's not the same, but I want to do another draft where we kind of go back and forth in a snake draft, but pick kind of who we think could win it. And then we'll each have a list of teams, 5 each, and we could track it during the tournament. Like a win's a point. Whoever gets the most wins on each team wins it. So what we'll do is someone picks first, then two picks until we have 10 total, 5 each on who we think could win. You want to go first?
Love it. I got my pen. I got my paper. I'm ready.
Me too.
You're giving me the first pick?
You can have it if you want it. You're my guest over here.
Again? Okay. All right. Well, my easy pick, number 1, I'm going to go Texas again. I think they have the best chance of winning it all in this tournament, just the most well-rounded team. So I'm going with Texas.
Absolutely. So I get 2 now for the snake draft. So I'm going to go Wisconsin and Stanford.
Okay.
All right. You've got 2 now.
I will go with Louisville and Pitt.
Pitt. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
I think they have the best chance to potentially upset. Gosh, I don't know. I'm going with Louisville and Pitt.
Okay. I think I'm going to go. Oh, this is tough now. Once we get past like your four teams, I'm going to go
I
Nebraska.
know.
And then for my fourth team, let's go with Ohio State.
Okay. I like it. I like it. I will follow suit-ish, and I'm going to pick a Big Ten team. I'm going to go with, to round it out, I'm going Minnesota.
Figured.
And then with my last pick, I'm going to go with Oregon.
You got me
I think
there.
they could be super, super sneaky. I
think so too. And that'll play out to each of our teams because I have Nebraska and you have Oregon. So whoever comes out on top of that, I'm gonna do
and
that.
Minnesota, Ohio State. That's a perfect matchup.
Yeah, there you go. So either it's gonna be really one-sided, I think. Okay, and then for my last team, I'm gonna go. Who's gonna get me the most wins? Make it the farthest. I think San Diego will make it.
Yeah.
If I have them in the regional finals, that'll at least get me a few wins.
Look, San Diego's a team right now. I could easily see them again, potentially beating Stanford, maybe if they get there. But I don't know. I mean, it's a team that we could see upset a lot of people, or it's a team we could see go out early. And I would love if they upset people. It would make everything so fun.
Oh, it would be so much fun. And it would change things moving forward, I think. I think they'd get a lot more respect. I mean, Texas has that respect. They don't have a super tough conference, but they get that respect because of their past. And if San Diego kind of does the same thing, I think they'll have that moving forward as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But Emily, it's been so much fun. We ended on a fun game. We'll keep these in our notes and kind of keep track. We could revisit it later. But thanks for joining me. This is always so much fun. And we've got a great tournament coming up.
Oh, we got a good tournament. I could not be more excited. Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun chatting with you.